My name is Tessa Rowland, and I'm 32 years old. If you'd looked at my life on paper 4 years ago, you probably would have said something annoyingly neat like, she's fine, she's safe, she's got it figured out. Married 6 years, nice apartment in the city, stable jobs, decent savings, no dramatic fights loud enough for the neighbors to hear. We look like a couple who'd done everything the right way. Sometimes I think about that version of my life the way you think about an old photograph, flat, glossy, frozen in a moment where you can't see the cracks spreading underneath the frame. You definitely wouldn't see the part where I'd eventually leave in the middle of the night and drive across state lines with 2 duffel bags, or the part where, years later, my ex-husband would stand frozen in the doorway of my office while my toddler ran straight into my arms. Back then, all you'd see was this. I was married to Evan Cole. He worked in marketing for a mid-size agency, slick decks, client dinners, networking events. I was a software developer, which basically meant I spent my days talking to computers and my nights trying to pretend I could turn my brain off. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's wedding. He made some stupid joke about the DJ's playlist. I laughed harder than it deserved, and by dessert, we were already planning a second date. 18 months later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, we got married. The standard progression, like someone had handed us a checklist and we were dutifully ticking boxes. For a while, it worked. We had our routines, Sunday grocery runs, takeout and Netflix on Fridays, shared calendars and shared passwords, and a shared sense of being grown-ups now. And then, sometime around year 5, things started to shift. It wasn't dramatic at first, just drift. Evan started staying out later. At first, it was the occasional late client meeting, the kind that comes with free drinks and networking opportunities. Then it became, the team's going out. We're celebrating a big win. My boss wants everyone at this mixer. His job was social. Mine wasn't. I spent most evenings hunched over my laptop, debugging someone else's mess, or rereading the same paragraph of a book because my brain was still stuck on a code review comment. It made sense that he was out more, I told myself. Different careers, different rhythms. But then the little things piled up. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when he was texting. The calls he'd take in the hallway, voice low, pacing. The new clothes, shirts that fit just a little too well, a watch I knew we didn't talk about buying, the new cologne that clung to him when he crawled into bed after midnight, the sudden renewed obsession with the gym at weird hours. I think better on the treadmill, he'd say, like late-night cardio was some kind of personality trait. I wasn't stupid. I knew what all of that looked like from the outside, but on the inside, when it's your life and your marriage and your history, you learn how to explain things away in creative little ways. Trust your husband, I told myself. He wouldn't do that. He couldn't do that. Not to us. Then came the Thursday in March. I still remember the way the dark felt that night. Heavy, sticky, like the air itself knew something I didn't. I woke up because the bed was cold on his side. At first, I thought he was in the bathroom. I reached out, fingers brushing nothing but sheets. The clock on my nightstand glowed 3:45 a.m. Evan, I called softly. Silence. I blinked, brain slow, trying to remember if he'd said he'd be late. Had there been some event? A launch? A client dinner? My mind came up blank. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No missed calls, no texts. A thin thread of unease tugged at my spine. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a hoodie, and padded through the apartment. Kitchen. Dark. Living room. Empty. His shoes weren't by the door. His coat was gone from the hook. His keys weren't in the ceramic bowl where he always tossed them. I walked to the window and peered out at the parking lot below. His car was exactly where he'd left it, so he hadn't driven anywhere. He'd left with someone else. My throat went dry. I opened our messages and typed with fingers that felt slightly numb. Where are you? I watched the little sending bar complete and then nothing. No dots. No read receipt. I hit call. It went straight to voicemail. Once, twice. By the third time, I was pacing the living room, my breath shallow, heart pounding a little too fast. A part of me whispered the rational options. Car trouble, dead battery, a friend's couch, a lost phone. But the louder part, the part that had been watching the late nights and the angled screens and the new cologne, already knew. I sat on the couch and waited. 4 a.m., 4:15, 4:30. Each minute was a heavy, dragging thing. I stared at the door until it blurred. At 4:47 a.m., I heard the rattle of a key in the lock. The door swung open, and Evan stepped inside like it was 6 p.m. on a Tuesday instead of almost dawn on a Thursday. He froze for half a second when he saw me sitting there, then smoothed his expression into something casual, like he'd rehearsed it in the hallway. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "You're up." "You're just getting home," I said. My voice sounded unfamiliar, flat, almost too calm. He shrugged out of his coat. I noticed the faint smell of alcohol and something floral that wasn't my perfume. "Yeah, time got away from me." "Where were you?" "Out." I stared at him. "Out where?" He bent to untie his shoes like this was a normal conversation. "Tess, come on, I was with friends. We went out after this thing at work. We lost track of time." "Which friends?" I asked. He straightened up, mouth tightening. "Does it matter?" "It's almost 5 in the morning," I said quietly. "You were gone all night. Your phone was off. I had no idea where you were. Yes, it matters." He dropped his coat on the back of a chair a little too hard. "My phone died, okay? Relax. I don't have to report my every movement to you." "I'm not asking for every movement," I said. My palms were cold, but my voice stayed steady. "I'm asking where you were at 3:50 a.m. when you weren't in our bed." He turned toward me then, eyes flashing. "Stop acting like I owe you explanations," he snapped. "I'm not reporting to you." Something inside me went very, very still. There it was, not just the lateness, not just the silence, but the contempt wrapped around the words. The way he said you like I was the problem. Like the question itself was offensive. I'd spent months sanding down my own instincts so they wouldn't scratch his comfort. And now, in one sentence, he'd told me exactly where I stood. I studied his face. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't sheepish or embarrassed or even slightly apologetic. He was angry that I'd dared to ask. "Got it," I said finally. He frowned. "Got what?" "Nothing," I replied. "Forget it." I stood up and walked past him. The hallway felt longer than it ever had. In our bedroom, the lamp by my side of the bed cast a soft, golden circle over the rumpled sheets. It looked like a picture from a catalog. Safe, warm, staged. I sat on the edge for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of him moving around in the kitchen. Cabinets, the fridge, the tap running. No apology, no attempt at an explanation beyond relax. Something in my chest shifted, like a piece of furniture finally scraping across the floor into its rightful place. I opened the closet and pulled out 2 large duffel bags. I didn't move frantically. I moved like someone following a checklist I'd written in my head months ago, just in case. Clothes first. Enough for all seasons. Work outfits, jeans, the hoodie I was still wearing. Underwear, socks, running shoes, toiletries, my laptop and charger, external hard drive, passport, birth certificate, social security card, bank statements, a folder with freelance contracts and tax returns. I could hear the shower turn on down the hall. I had maybe 10 minutes. I moved faster. I didn't touch anything that would start a fight later. No furniture, no shared purchases, no sentimental household items. Just the things that were unquestionably mine. By the time the water shut off, both bags were zipped and lined up by the bedroom door, like obedient dogs waiting to be let out. I slipped off my wedding ring and set it gently on the nightstand, next to the alarm clock still frozen at 4:47 a.m. in my mind. In the kitchen, I laid my house key on the counter. The metal clicked against the stone, a tiny, final sound. No note, no explanation. He'd made it very clear he didn't owe me one, so I didn't owe him one either. I carried the bags down the stairs, my arms burning, my heart weirdly calm. It was that same calm you get right before a big drop on a roller coaster. The moment when you realize there's no going back, only through. I loaded the bags into the trunk of my car and slid into the driver's seat. For a second, I just sat there, fingers curled around the steering wheel, looking up at the dark windows of our apartment. Our life was up there. The couch we'd picked out together. The overpriced coffee table he'd insisted on. The framed photos from vacations where we'd smiled so wide the sun reflected off our teeth. It all suddenly felt like props in a play I'd been cast in without reading the script. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine caught. The dashboard lit up. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the empty street, the city lights blurring past as I headed for the highway. I didn't have a plan, not really. All I had was a direction, a way. An hour later, I checked into a cheap motel off the interstate. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. The bedspread was a pattern of colors no sane person would choose on purpose. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally turned my phone back on. The screen exploded with notifications. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Evan's name over and over again. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Call me back." Seriously, Tessa, you're scaring me. If you don't answer, I'm calling the police. For a second, my thumb hovered over his name. Then I put the phone down on the nightstand, screen still glowing, and pressed and held the power button until everything went dark. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. I lay back on the unfamiliar bed, stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, and listened to the hum of the air conditioner in the wall. Somewhere, miles away, my husband was spinning his own story about where I'd gone and why. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was the one who owed anyone an explanation. I closed my eyes, and despite everything, I slept. The motel didn't magically fix anything. I woke up to rough sheets, a thin pillow, and a spine that hated me, but I also woke up to something I hadn't felt in months. Quiet. Not the loaded quiet of our apartment, the kind where every silence felt like it was hiding something. This was just quiet. A cheap air conditioner rattling in the wall, cars passing sporadically outside, no footsteps pacing the hallway, no phone lighting up with late-night notifications turned face down on the coffee table. For about 10 seconds, I forgot where I was. I reached out to the side like I always did, expecting to find warm skin and the dip of another body. My hand met empty mattress and an ugly patterned comforter. Reality slammed back into place. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. My phone was still on the nightstand, powered off. For a moment, I stared at it, feeling that familiar pull. Turn it on, check. Maybe he apologized. Maybe there's an explanation that makes this all less insane. Instead, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, stood, and walked to the bathroom. I brushed my teeth with the little travel toothbrush I'd thrown in my bag without thinking. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked like someone who'd spent the night outrunning a life she'd spent 6 years building. Hair a mess, eyes puffy, jaw set. "You did this," I whispered to my reflection. "You left." The strangest part was that underneath the fear and the nausea and the what now, there was a thin, bright line of something else. Relief. By the time I checked out, the sky was a dull, overcast gray. I loaded my bags back into the trunk and stood for a moment with my hand on the lid, feeling the weight of every decision pressing down. I could turn around, drive back, walk in with some half-baked story about needing space and pretend this never happened. Or I could keep going. I got in the car and pulled back onto the highway. I drove west. I didn't blast music or cry dramatically with my forearm over my eyes. I just drove. Rest stops. Gas stations. A drive-through coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. My mind moved from one practical question to another like stepping stones. Where am I going? How much can I afford? What do I do about work? About the lease? About the divorce? The word felt huge and heavy in my chest. Divorce. We'd never even said it in an argument. We weren't that couple. We were the we'll figure it out couple. The we're both reasonable adults couple. Right up until we weren't. By early evening, I crossed into another state. The highway signs changed. The radio ads changed. The landscape flattened out into something unfamiliar. I pulled into a small town purely because there was a vacancy sign glowing in the window of a rundown, long-stay motel, and my eyes were starting to blur. It turned out the motel had a bulletin board near the office with faded flyers, babysitting services, used furniture, and, tucked in one corner, small studio for rent. Month to month, furnished. Call Nora. I stared at the little tear-off strip with the number on it for a long time before I ripped one off. An hour later, after a brief phone call and a quick drive across town, I was standing in a cramped studio that smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and old carpet. It had a full-size bed, a tiny kitchenette, a lopsided table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a window that faced east. Morning light, I thought. At least there'll be morning light. I know it's nothing fancy, Nora said, watching me carefully. She was in her 50s, hair pulled back in a messy bun, keys jingling in her hand. But it's safe. Month to month. Cash is fine. I swallowed. The lump in my throat had been sitting there all day. It's great. I'll take it. I paid first and last month's rent in cash from the emergency envelope I'd tucked in my duffel bag years ago and never thought I'd actually need. She handed me a key, wished me luck in a way that made me wonder what she'd guessed, and left me alone. I set my bags down in the middle of the floor and turned in a slow circle, taking it in. This was it. My entire life now fit into a studio apartment and 2 duffel bags. I sat down on the bare mattress and finally turned my phone back on. The screen came alive in a rush of light and sound. 70-something text messages. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails. From Evan, from his sister, from numbers I didn't recognize. Where are you? This isn't funny. Tessa, answer me. I'm worried. If you don't respond, I'm calling the police. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. We're married. We don't just walk out. It went on, oscillating between concern and anger and confusion. A new message came in while I was still scrolling. Seriously, pick up the phone. We're adults. Something in me snapped a little at that. I typed slowly, carefully, thumb steady. I'm fine. Don't contact me again. I hit send before I could overthink it. He called immediately. I stared at the screen until it went dark, then held down the block button on his contact until it disappeared from my favorites list. He called from another number a few minutes later. Block. Then another block. An email notification popped up. I opened my settings and created a filter to automatically delete anything from his address before I could see it. It felt brutal. It also felt necessary. I wasn't interested in explanations that only existed because he'd finally faced consequences. I wasn't interested in apologies dragged out by panic. I wasn't interested in being talked out of the one clear decision I'd made in months. The next morning, I called my manager. Hey, Tessa, he said, clearly not expecting whatever this was going to be. Everything okay? You never take days off. I need some time, I said, voice steady. Family emergency. He hesitated. How much time are we talking? A couple weeks, I said. Maybe more. I'll document everything and hand off my current projects. I just need to step back for a bit. There was a pause where I could hear him weighing my reliability against the inconvenience. Okay, he said finally. Take the time. Let me know what you decide. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the ceiling for a while. 2 weeks wasn't going to fix any of this, but it bought me a little breathing room. The truth was, I wasn't walking into this with nothing. For the past year, I'd been freelancing on the side. Small contracts, bug fixes, building out features for startups that couldn't afford a full-time dev. It had started as extra vacation money and grown into something more serious. It was the one secret I'd kept from Evan, not because it was wrong, but because I liked having one piece of my financial life that was mine. I hadn't hidden the income. Our taxes showed it, but the separate savings account attached to it that he didn't know about. I opened my laptop, tethered my phone's hotspot, and logged into my bank accounts. There they were, the numbers. Cold, impersonal, oddly comforting. Our joint savings. I transferred half into my new individual account at a bank in this new town. Half of what we'd built together. Not a penny more. I left his half sitting there with his name still attached. I didn't touch the joint checking. That would start a fight I wasn't interested in having. My freelance savings. Enough to cover a few months of rent and food if I was careful. Enough to give me a runway. I opened a new tab and started searching for remote software positions. Big companies, small companies, anything that wasn't tied to the city I'd just left. Within a week, I'd updated my resume, sent out more applications than I could count, and taken a handful of video interviews from the wobbly table in my little studio, my laptop propped on a stack of old magazines. The silence between those calls was loud. It was just me, my thoughts, and the hum of the refrigerator. In the evenings, when my brain was too fried to code, the doubts crept in. You overreacted. People work late. Phones die. You should have waited. You should have pushed for counseling. What if this is a huge mistake? What if everyone finds out you just ran? But then I'd remember his face at 4:47 a.m., the casual shrug, the way he'd said, I'm not reporting to you like I was a prison warden instead of a wife asking why her husband disappeared all night. And underneath the doubt, that thin, bright line of relief would glow a little stronger. 2 weeks later, I had 3 job offers for fully remote positions, all decent pay, all with teams spread across different time zones, where nobody cared where my physical body existed as long as my code compiled. I picked the one that felt the most stable, accepted, and gave notice to my previous job. My manager was surprised, then understanding, then awkwardly kind in the way people are when they know something bad must have happened but don't know what. With a start date a month away, I decided to upgrade my life from woman sleeping on a sad motel bed to woman with a functional apartment. I found a 1-bedroom in a quieter neighborhood, tree-lined streets, an aging but solid building, neighbors who nodded and then minded their own business. The rent was cheap enough that I could breathe without feeling like every grocery trip endangered my future. The night I moved in, surrounded by cardboard boxes and mismatched thrift store furniture I'd bought off local listings, I sat on the floor with a plastic fork and takeout lo mein and realized something. For the first time in a long time, my anxiety wasn't about whether someone was lying to me. It was about whether I could build a life on my own terms. I opened my laptop and filled out the online forms to start the divorce. No accusations, no detailed narrative, just the simple truth. Irreconcilable differences. I asked for a clean split of assets, no alimony, no petty fights over furniture or decor. When the system asked for an address to send the papers to, my fingers hovered for a second. Then I typed in the apartment I'd left in the middle of the night. I imagined the envelope arriving, his key turning in the lock, his hands flipping through the mail, his eyes catching on my name next to petition for dissolution of marriage. I didn't feel satisfaction, not really, just a sense of something shifting into place. I hit submit. Somewhere in the middle of the night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I rolled over, looked at the screen, and let it go to voicemail. In the morning, I blocked that number too. It would be months before I met the man who would sit across from me in a coffee shop and ask, with genuine curiosity, "Is that book any good?" Months before, I'd feel something warm and terrifying unfurl in my chest at the way he listened. But sitting cross-legged on the floor of my half-furnished apartment, divorce papers in motion, and a new job on the horizon, I had no idea any of that was coming. All I knew was this. I had walked away from someone who believed basic honesty was optional. Now I had to figure out who I was without him. It's strange how a life can settle into place without making any dramatic announcement. One day you wake up in a tiny apartment surrounded by empty takeout containers and feel like you're squatting in someone else's life. And then weeks later, you're making coffee in the same kitchen, half asleep, and it finally hits you. This is mine now. A month after I filed for divorce, I started my new job. Fully remote. Sensible onboarding. A team scattered across 3 time zones. The kind of place where nobody cared whether you wore real pants, as long as you merged your pull requests on time. It was the first time in almost a year that I felt competent again. Not as a wife, not as someone holding a dying marriage together by the corners. Just me. I built routines. Morning runs at 6. A real breakfast. Work from 8 to 5. Gym in the evenings. Dinners that weren't always microwaved. A book before bed if my brain wasn't in meltdown mode. My days took the shape of quiet predictability, something I didn't know I'd been starving for. And then the divorce was finalized. My lawyer called me one afternoon while I was in the middle of debugging a feature that refused to stop throwing a null pointer exception. "She signed," he said. I froze. "That's it?" "That's it. No contest. It's done." No contest, no attempt to negotiate, no dramatic plea, no last-minute emotional ambush. Just a clean signature on a line that ended 6 years. I expected something inside me to split open. Grief, anger, nostalgia, anything. But all I felt was a long exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Afterward, I needed air. I closed my laptop, grabbed my jacket, and walked to a coffee shop downtown. It was one of those small places with mismatched chairs and plants, living in whatever jars people had donated. The windows fogged easily, blurring the outside world into soft watercolor shapes. I ordered a latte and sat near the back, holding the warm cup between my hands like it was grounding me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved. I just existed. For the first time, that felt like enough. The shop was busy. Students typing furiously, people in business casual holding hushed meetings, a couple arguing softly over a shared pastry. I was halfway through my drink when a man sat down at the table next to mine. Late 20s or early 30s, dark hair, easy smile, wearing a button-up rolled at the sleeves like he was trying and failing to look like someone who didn't take himself too seriously. He glanced at the book I'd set beside my cup. "Good book?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" He nodded at it. "I read that one last year. The ending destroyed me." I looked down at the book. It was something I'd picked up secondhand without thinking. Half mystery, half character study, full of emotional gut punches. "You read it?" "Yeah," he said. "And if you're not at least halfway through, I'm jealous. You still get to experience all the twists." I stared at him for a second too long. He'd sat down next to me by coincidence. That's it. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't trying to be charming. He was just being kind. It felt foreign. I cleared my throat. "I'm almost finished." "You liking it?" "I think so. It's a little slow in parts." "Stick with it," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's worth the payoff." A small silence settled between us, surprisingly comfortable. "I'm Michael," he added. "Tessa." He smiled again, warm, not performative. "Nice to meet you, Tessa." I nodded, unsure what else to say. He didn't press. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't try to slide into conversation after conversation. He opened his laptop and quietly did his work. But every once in a while, he glanced over with that same gentle curiosity. Not prying, not expectant, just noticing. When the shop announced it was closing in 5 minutes, he shut his laptop and stretched his arms above his head with a soft groan. "Hey," he said as he stood. "I don't normally do this, but—" My stomach tightened. Oh no, here it comes. The pity smile, the condescending pickup line, or worse, the "can I give you advice?" "Yes, man. You seem cool, and I'd like to talk again sometime, maybe over dinner, without the risk of the barista sweeping us out the door." I blinked. "Oh, okay. Only if you want to," he added quickly, palms up like he was trying to calm a startled animal. "No pressure. Zero, I swear." I laughed softly despite myself. "Dinner sounds nice." He offered his phone, I typed in my number, and that was that. We didn't text immediately. We both waited until the next morning, and even then, it was simple. "Good coffee yesterday. Dinner tomorrow?" Michael. "Sure." Tessa. Our first date was at a small Italian place that somehow managed to be cozy without trying too hard. He held the door open for me, but not in a performative way, just a thoughtless habit. Over pasta and wine, I found myself laughing more than I expected. Real laughter. Not the polite version I'd been handing out for years to keep peace. He told me he was a 4th-grade teacher who'd moved from the Midwest a couple of years ago, that he loved hiking and terrible reality TV, that he had a sister he adored, and a dog back home he missed so much it physically pained him. I told him I was a software developer and recently divorced. He didn't flinch. "Rough?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. He didn't ask for details. He didn't press into the wound. He just nodded. "I'm glad you're here now." The second date was easier than the first. The third even easier. By the fourth, we had developed inside jokes. Tiny, harmless things that felt like pieces of a new language. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I felt something inside me thaw. It wasn't a sudden falling. It was a slow unlearning of fear, one quiet evening at a time. About 4 months in, we were walking along the river after dinner. The air was crisp, our hands brushed. He glanced over at me, like he wanted to ask something, but wasn't sure if he was allowed. "Can I—" he started. I reached for his hand before he could finish the question. He let out a breath that sounded relieved. "This okay?" he asked. "It's good," I said softly. "It's really good." By month 6, we were seeing each other regularly, not clingy, not dramatic, just steady, consistent, like oxygen. And I kept waiting for the moment he would turn into someone else. The moment he'd snap or disappear or angle his phone screen away. The moment the mask would slip. But it never happened. Michael wasn't perfect. He sometimes forgot to answer texts. He overwatered plants. He lost his wallet twice in 1 month. But he was sincere. He was present. He was honest even when it made him look silly. 8 months in, I told him the truth about Evan. Not the soft version, the real one. The night he came home at nearly 5 in the morning. His defensiveness. The way he made me feel small for asking. Packing while he showered. Driving into darkness with no plan. Filing for divorce alone. We were sitting on his couch, legs tucked under us, a blanket over our laps. My voice shook at first, then steadied. When I finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he took my hand. "That must have been incredibly hard," he said. "It was," I admitted. "But it was also necessary." He nodded. "Do you regret it?" "No," I swallowed. "Not even a little." He squeezed my hand gently. "Good, because you deserved better than that." It was the first time someone had said those words to me without implying that I was partly to blame. A year after we met, we moved in together. His apartment was brighter than mine, full of plants and mismatched mugs and cozy blankets he'd picked up at thrift stores because they had personality. It was a home that felt lived in, not curated. So I brought my things, my thrifted dishes, my small bookshelf, my favorite coffee mug with a tiny chip in the rim, and somewhere between combining silverware drawers and arguing about which side of the closet was whose, I realized I wasn't rebuilding alone anymore. I was building something new, something sturdy, something honest. 2 years into dating, he took me on a hike we'd been talking about for months, a steep trail, the kind that punished your calves and made your lungs feel too small. When we reached the summit, the world opened up around us. Mountains, sky, the kind of view that makes you rethink the scale of your problems. He turned to me, breathless, face flushed from the climb. "I know we said we'd take things slow," he said, voice shaking just a little, "but I can't imagine my life without you." He dropped to one knee. My hand flew to my mouth. "Tessa Rowland," he said, smiling even though his eyes were wet. "Will you marry me?" I didn't cry. I laughed. A startled, disbelieving, joy-soaked laugh that echoed across the mountaintop. Yes, I said, of course yes. We got married in a small ceremony. Just family and a few friends. His parents hugged me like I'd been theirs forever. His sister cried so hard she had to redo her makeup halfway through the reception. 6 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the bathroom floor with the test in my hand, shaking, my heart pounding in my throat. When I showed Michael, he stared at the test like it was a holy artifact. Then he sat down beside me. "Tessa," he whispered, "we're having a baby." I nodded, tears finally spilling over. He pulled me into his arms and held me like he could hold together every piece of me that had ever cracked. The pregnancy was mostly smooth. Morning sickness early on, cravings that made no sense. "Pickles and peanut butter?" he'd asked, horrified, and a lot of nights where I sat quietly, one hand on my belly, feeling the flutter of something entirely new. When our child was born, a perfect tiny human with Michael's smile in my eyes, my entire world rearranged itself again. I held them in the hospital bed, exhausted and overwhelmed, and thought, this is the life I was supposed to find. But I didn't know yet that 4 years later, that same child would run into my office at the exact moment my ex-husband walked through the door, and everything would shift again. 4 years passed in a way I can only describe as quietly miraculous. Not flashy, not cinematic, just steady. Steady mornings, steady laughter, steady love. The kind of life where the joy doesn't shout, it hums. By the time our child turned 3, I had become the kind of mother I never pictured myself being. The one who cut sandwiches into oddly specific shapes, who saved every scribble like it was museum-worthy art, who carried a tiny backpack filled with emergency snacks and one renegade sock. Michael had become, well, Michael. The man who danced in the kitchen with our child before school. The man who called me Tess, only when he was proud of me or when he wanted to kiss me before I left for work. The man who warmed my coffee mug in winter so my hands wouldn't be cold. I'd gone from a remote developer to a team lead, then a manager, and finally director of engineering for our company's local branch. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. My days were filled with sprint planning, code reviews, performance evaluations, and more meetings than any sane person should attend. Our house, 3 bedrooms with a swing set in the yard, always smelled faintly of coffee and crayons. It had a corner filled with toys that multiplied when I wasn't looking, and a fridge covered with finger paintings and preschool announcements. Life didn't feel perfect. It felt lived in, which honestly was better. On a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, the sun was streaming through my office window, turning the hardwood floor into long strips of gold. I was deep in quarterly reports, the kind that made my brain feel like melting cheese, when someone knocked on my door. My assistant Mara peeked her head in. "Hey, Tessa, there's someone here to see you." I frowned. "Scheduled?" "No, she said it's personal." "Did she give her name?" Mara hesitated, then stepped inside and handed me a business card. When I saw the name printed on it, my stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor tilted. Evan Cole. I wasn't sure what expression crossed my face, but Mara's eyes widened slightly. "I can tell her you're unavailable," she offered quickly. "Really? I can send her away." I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "Did she seem upset?" "She seemed determined," Mara said carefully, "and nervous, I think. She wouldn't leave." Of course she wouldn't. I stared at the card. White, minimalist, pretentious font, a faint crease down the middle, like someone had been bending it between their fingers. 4 years. 4 years of silence. 4 years of rebuilding a life he never got to ruin. "Send her in," I said finally. "You're sure?" "Yes." My voice was calm, maybe too calm. "She can have 5 minutes." Mara nodded and slipped out. 2 minutes later, my office door opened. Evan stepped inside. I had expected to feel something, anger, anxiety, maybe a spike of adrenaline. But what I felt was distance, like I was looking at someone from a past life I barely remembered. He looked older, not just aged, worn. His face was thinner, cheekbones sharper. His hair was cut shorter, darker, like he'd stopped caring about things that once mattered. His posture was slightly hunched, as though carrying something heavy he didn't know how to set down. "Tessa," he said softly. I didn't stand. "Evan." He closed the door behind him and stood awkwardly near the chair opposite my desk. "You look different." "I am different." He nodded, eyes darting around the office as if delaying the reason he had come. "You've done well. Director of engineering. That's impressive." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "Can I sit?" You already are. My tone wasn't sharp, just neutral. He sat, silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. He clasped his hands together, knuckles whitening. I know you probably don't want to see me, he began. I didn't ask to. I figured, he said with a humorless laugh. I'm not here to bother you. I needed to talk to you, to explain. I don't need explanations. That was 4 years ago. Please, he said quickly. Just 5 minutes. I exhaled. You have 3. He nodded, inhaled shakily. That night, the night you asked where I was with someone. My expression didn't change. I know. He rushed on, flustered. But it wasn't what you think. It wasn't an affair. Not then. I was with a friend, a coworker, Lena. Her marriage was falling apart. She called me crying. I went to meet her. She needed someone. I was just trying to help. Why didn't you say that? I asked evenly. When I asked at 5 a.m. His jaw tightened. Because you were interrogating me. You looked at me like I'd done something wrong. I felt attacked. I got defensive. And that justified lying? His face crumpled slightly. I made a mistake. A big one. But I wasn't cheating that night. I watched him for a long moment. Are you done lying? I asked quietly. He blinked. Tessa, you didn't come here for closure, I said. You came here because you're drowning in guilt, and you want me to hand you a life raft. So let's try this again. His throat bobbed. Were you cheating on me? Silence. Long, heavy, telling. I didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. Finally, his shoulders sagged. Yes, he whispered. For a moment, the room felt too still. Not painful, just still. How long? I asked. About 6 months. Her name? He swallowed hard. Lena Briggs. Married? He nodded slowly. 3 kids. I exhaled, slow, deep, steady. He looked up, eyes glassy. I ended it after you left. Everything fell apart. Her husband found out. I lost my job. She lost hers. Her marriage is over, and I've regretted it every day since. You didn't regret it when you came home at 5 a.m, I said. You didn't regret it when I asked for the truth. You regretted it when you faced consequences. Tessa, please. No, I said softly. Don't do that. Don't rewrite this. He blinked rapidly, breathing uneven. I needed to apologize. I needed to see you, to know you're okay. I am. He nodded, defeated. Yeah, I can see that. He stood hesitantly. I guess that's all. I'm sorry I bothered you. He turned toward the door, hand on the handle. And that was when I heard it. Mommy! A high, bright, delighted voice barreling down the hallway. Before I could turn, the door burst open. A small body, dark curls bouncing, backpack hanging crookedly, shoes lighting up with every step, ran straight into my office and launched into my arms. I caught them automatically, lifting them onto my hip. My child. My heart outside my body. And when I looked up, Evan was frozen, completely still. His eyes locked on the little person clinging to me with absolute trust. You have a kid, he whispered. I do. How old? 3. I watched the math happen in his head. The realization. The sting. He swallowed. You moved on fast. I met his gaze without flinching. I moved on to something real. He looked like I'd hit him. Before either of us could say another word, another figure appeared in the doorway. Michael. He stopped just behind Evan, taking in the scene instantly. My child perched on my hip, Evan standing like a ghost dredged from the past, me watching it all unfold. Sorry for the surprise drop-in, Michael said gently, stepping around Evan to kiss the top of our child's head. We were nearby. His eyes flicked to mine. Are you okay? They asked silently. I nodded. Michael turned to Evan, polite but firm. You must be Evan. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. Yeah, I was just leaving. Michael nodded once. Safe travels. Evan stared at him, at me, at our child. Something inside him seemed to crumple. He stepped out of the doorway without another word. Michael closed the door gently behind him. Our child squirmed to get down, immediately fascinated by the pen on my desk. Michael stepped closer, brushing his fingers against my arm. What did he want? Closure, I said. I gave him the truth. He nodded. Good. I exhaled, leaning into him just a fraction. Lunch? He smiled. The 3 of us? Yeah, I said, heart finally steady. That sounds perfect. People imagine closure as something cinematic. A big speech, tears, a door slamming, a dramatic walkaway scored by emotional orchestra music. But real closure isn't loud. It's quiet, almost anticlimactic. It sneaks in like a final exhale once the storm has already passed. The day after Evan showed up at my office, I expected something. A follow-up email, A text from an unfamiliar number. One last attempt to rewrite the past. Nothing came. No calls, no messages. Just silence. And the thing about silence is, you start to realize how peaceful it is when it isn't full of fear. That evening, after dinner and bath time and a spirited negotiation about why we do not draw on walls, even if the marker is washable, Michael and I finally collapsed on the couch. Our child was asleep in the next room, breathing softly through a stuffy nose. Michael rested his head on my shoulder. Rough day? Long, I said. Not rough, just heavy. Want to talk about it? Maybe, I said, but not yet. He kissed the side of my head, slow and warm. Whenever you're ready. That was the nice thing about Michael. He never asked for emotional labor on a deadline. He just held the space open. We watched something mindless on TV, hands tangled on the couch between us, and I kept thinking about Evan's face when our child rushed into my arms. Shock, regret, something bordering on grief. But not for me, not really. He grieved the version of me he had imagined was waiting in a freeze frame somewhere, still stuck in the life he tore apart, still available to validate his remorse. The reality must have been a gut punch, a family he couldn't place himself into, a life that didn't leave a him-shaped vacancy. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done, really done. For the first time since I left him at 4:47 a.m., I felt the chapter close, not with a slam, but a click. A week later, I got the missing details. It happened at a birthday party our friends were throwing for their toddler, a blur of cupcakes, sticky fingers, and children running in every direction. I was helping clean up juice boxes when I heard my name from behind me. Tessa, oh my God, hey! It was Claire, one of Evan's old friends from before everything imploded. She lived a few towns over and knew my friend through a coworker's cousin or something equally random. She looked surprised to see me, then relieved, then mildly anxious. I've been wondering about you, she said. Are you doing okay? I'm good, I said simply. She hesitated, biting her lip. I heard Evan showed up at your work. I nodded. He did. I'm sorry, he's been a mess for a long time. I said nothing, letting her talk if she wanted to. I wasn't going to say anything, she continued, but I feel like you deserve the truth about that night. I gave a short, humorless laugh. I already know, he admitted it. Good, she said, relieved, because the story he used to tell people was insane. What did he say? I asked, my curiosity dry, not emotional. That you overreacted, she said. That you accused him of cheating when he was just helping a distressed colleague. That you packed your bags in some kind of impulsive rage. I snorted. Impulsive, right. But the truth? Claire shook her head. We all knew. I think even he knew we knew. She lowered her voice. It was Lena, his boss. They were having an affair for months. Everyone at the agency suspected it. They weren't subtle. I raised an eyebrow. Her husband? Found out, she said. Exploded, apparently. Went straight to the company. HR got involved. Evan got fired. Lena got transferred and then quit. Sounds about right. He lost a lot, she added. Job, reputation, friends, himself, I think. I shrugged, not cruelly, just factually. I left before all that, I said. Whatever happened after wasn't because of me. No, she said. But losing you broke something in him he didn't know how to fix. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. Claire sighed. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're okay. I am, I said. Really. She hugged me briefly before running off to help her toddler find a missing shoe. And that was that. The truth, clean and uncomplicated. Later that night, after our own child fell asleep and the house settled into its usual gentle quiet, I sat on the edge of the bed rubbing moisturizer into my hands, thinking about everything Claire had said. Michael came out of the bathroom, towel around his shoulders, hair damp. He watched me for a moment, leaning against the doorframe. You're quiet, he said. Just thinking. Dangerous, he teased lightly, coming to sit beside me. I nudged his knee with mine. You know you're the reason I don't regret anything, right? Michael blinked, startled. What brought that on? I've been replaying the old life lately, I admitted. Not missing it, just comparing. He turned fully toward me. And I keep thinking how lucky I am that I left when I did, I said softly, that I didn't waste another year trying to fix something that wasn't fixable. Michael smiled, not smug, not possessive, just warm. You didn't owe him your whole life, he said, or even one more day. I know, I said. Back then, I wasn't sure. Now, I really know. He touched my cheek gently. I'm glad you feel that. I leaned into his hand. You ever wonder how different things would be if I hadn't left? Sometimes, he admitted. But then I think, if you hadn't left, we would never have crossed paths. And that thought, he shook his head, It just feels wrong, like the universe would have lost track of itself. I laughed softly. That's dramatic. He kissed my forehead. Maybe, but true. Our child cried out in their sleep, muttered something unintelligible, then quieted again. We both smiled. Come on, Michael said. Let's go to bed. You've been carrying this for years. You can put it down now. I nodded, turning off the lamp. For the first time since my marriage ended, it felt possible. But the story wasn't fully over. Not yet. Because 6 months later, long after Evan vanished back into whatever life he was piecing together, something happened I hadn't expected. Something small. Something ordinary. Something that made me realize just how far I'd come. But that's the next part of the story. 6 months passed. 6 months of routines, of preschool drop-offs, of tiny Velcro shoes and spilled juice boxes. 6 months of warm breakfasts on sleepy weekends, of Michael humming while he chopped vegetables, of our child insisting that every stuffed animal at home deserved its own bedtime story. Life moved in small motions, not grand ones. And in those motions, I healed. Not dramatically, not in one epiphany, just cell by cell, day by day. Until one afternoon, something happened that made me realize just how fully I'd left my old life behind. It was a Thursday. My calendar was annoyingly full. 3 back-to-back meetings, a hiring panel, and a last-minute production issue that made my entire team collectively want to walk into the ocean. By the time I finished the afternoon stand-up, I was tired in the way only full-grown adults with responsibilities know, mentally, physically, existentially. I walked out to my car in the office parking lot, juggling my bag, my water bottle, and my laptop like some chaotic circus act. Then I opened the back door and froze. There, in the car seat, was a small stuffed dinosaur. Bright green, one eye slightly bigger than the other, a frayed tail from being dragged everywhere by chubby toddler hands. It wasn't the toy that made my chest tighten. It was the note tucked beside it. A torn scrap of notepad paper with Michael's handwriting. We dropped by your office, but you were in a meeting. Someone wanted to make sure you didn't miss him too much. M. I stared at the dinosaur, at the messy handwriting, at the tiny act of love wrapped in absolute normalcy. And then I sat down in the driver's seat and cried. Not sad tears, not overwhelmed tears. The kind of tears that come from realizing, fully, completely, that you ended up exactly where you needed to be. People like to ask what closure means. They think it's forgiveness, or understanding, or some moment where both parties meet in the middle, acknowledge the pain, and walk away clean. But that's not closure. Not in real life. Closure is realizing you don't have to respond. Closure is not replaying the old memories like they're warnings. Closure is waking up in a house you built with someone who chooses you every single day. Closure is being too busy living a good life to revisit the ruins of the old one. Closure is a stuffed dinosaur in the backseat of your car. When the divorce first happened, a lot of people told me I should have tried harder, that I should have gone to counseling, waited for an explanation, given him a chance to earn back trust, that leaving was too extreme. But here's what I know now. Someone who respects you doesn't make you beg for basic honesty. Someone who loves you doesn't turn a simple question into an interrogation. Someone who values you doesn't punish you for noticing the truth. If I had stayed with Evan, I would have lost myself piece by piece, day by day. I would have silenced my instincts, shrunk my questions, doubted my reality until I forgot I had one. Leaving didn't destroy my life. It saved it. It opened the door to the love I have now, to the child who runs into my arms like I hung the moon, to the man who warms my coffee mug in winter, to the home that hums with quiet joy instead of quiet fear, to the version of myself I had forgotten was possible. Every so often, Michael asks me, gently, never jealously, whether I think about my ex. If I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I ever feel guilty that I began building a new life so soon after ending the old one. And every time I give him the same answer. No, I say, because if I had stayed, I wouldn't have ended up here, with you, with our family, with this life. He always smiles at that. Good answer, he says. But it's not a good answer. It's the true one. A few weeks ago, we found out we're expecting again. This time, a little boy. Our child kissed my belly and announced they would be the best big sibling ever of all time forever, which, honestly, feels like a standard I can support. We've started talking about moving to a bigger house, maybe near a park, maybe with a bigger yard, maybe with a dog. Normal, boring, beautiful life stuff. A life that doesn't ask me to live small. A life where love never feels like a question I'm scared to ask. A life where honesty is effortless, not a bargaining chip. This isn't revenge. This isn't a comeback. This is what happens when you choose yourself, even when your voice shakes. When you walk away, even when every step feels like breaking. When you rebuild, even when the blueprint is nothing but hope. I didn't leave to punish Evan. I left because staying would have punished me. And the proof that I made the right choice? A 3-year-old with my eyes and Michael's smile. A man who picks up dinosaurs and leaves notes in my car. A second baby on the way. A home filled with laughter instead of apology. I didn't just move on. I moved into a better life. One I never would have found if I'd stayed waiting for a man who didn't know the value